5 Signs of a Stupid Person. How to recognize folly before it controls your life. Wisdom is rare, and foolishness is everywhere. Look around you. People react before they think, speak without understanding, and chase what will never satisfy them. They call opinion knowledge, emotion truth, and impulse intelligence. Stoic philosophy teaches that life is not about what happens to you, but about how you respond, how you govern your mind, and how you navigate the storms of existence. Yet most people surrender their minds to anger, fear, envy, and desire, living as if they are powerless victims of circumstance rather than masters of their reason. The truly stupid person is not defined by lack of information or education, but by a lack of self-mastery, reflection, and discernment. They fail to learn from experience, they cling to illusions, they seek validation from the fleeting approval of others, and they act as if words and actions carry no consequence. Their lives are a mirror of chaos, confusion, and frustration, and while it is easy to point at others and label them foolish, Stoicism reminds us that the first place to look is inward, to examine whether we ourselves are governed by reason or by our lower impulses. In this video, we will explore 5 unmistakable signs of a stupid person, not to shame but to awaken. By understanding these patterns, you can recognize them in yourself and others, cultivate clarity, self-control, and wisdom, and navigate life with virtue rather than chaos. This is not a lesson in arrogance. It is an invitation to reflection, to disciplined thought, and to the power of reason over impulse. If you desire to live well, act wisely, and remain unshaken by the folly of the world, you must first recognize what stupidity looks like. The time to understand, reflect, and choose is now. The first sign of a stupid person is the inability to master their own mind. They are ruled by impulse, emotion, and the endless chatter of the world around them. Where wisdom would pause, reflect, and deliberate, they react immediately, letting anger, fear, or desire dictate their actions. Life is a storm, yet they allow themselves to be tossed by every wind of circumstance, believing that they are powerless, when in fact the power of reason and self-discipline has been placed within them. Every unrestrained word, every impulsive action, every moment surrendered to emotion is a step further from clarity and understanding. The Stoics teach that the mind is the citadel of freedom. If you cannot govern it, you are not free. You are captive to every fleeting thought, every superficial impulse, every external noise that seeks to control your life. The foolish person blames the world for their turmoil, while the wise recognize that their response is theirs alone to command. They cannot distinguish between what they can control and what they cannot, and in their confusion, they stumble repeatedly, caught between reality and illusion. A mind unmastered will also fail to discern truth from appearance. It sees the surface and mistakes it for the whole, reacts to the immediate, and ignores the lasting consequences. A stupid person will jump to conclusions, believing their first impressions are infallible, ignoring evidence, reflection, and counsel. They mistake pride for confidence, opinion for understanding, and impulse for intelligence. Their decisions are hasty, and the results are often chaos, regret, and repeated mistakes. Those who master their minds, by contrast, weigh every thought against reason, every decision against virtue, and every impulse against their higher purpose. The foolish cannot pause, cannot reflect, and cannot learn from the patterns of life, remaining perpetually at the mercy of their ungoverned mind. The second sign of a stupid person is the refusal or inability to learn from experience. Life is a teacher, and every error, every failure, every misstep offers a lesson. The foolish, however, repeat the same mistakes over and over, unaware or unwilling to extract wisdom from the consequences of their actions. They see patterns but do not recognize them. They feel the pain but do not understand its source. Experience becomes a nuisance rather than a guide, and reality, a series of unfortunate events that happen to them, rather than the material from which they might grow. This is why history, both personal and communal, becomes a cycle of folly. They watch the consequences unfold, yet fail to change course. Pride convinces them that they already know, and fear prevents them from seeing clearly. Wisdom requires reflection and self-examination, yet the stupid person despises introspection. They rush forward, eager to repeat the same errors, to chase what is fleeting, to ignore the lessons that life delivers so insistently. They surround themselves with distractions, justifying their ignorance, and mask their lack of insight with noise, argument, and the illusion of activity. The Stoics remind us that the purpose of life is to grow in virtue and understanding, yet the foolish turn away from this path, preferring the comfort of repetition and the illusion of knowledge. They cannot see the value in stillness, in careful observation, in learning from their own experiences and those of others. Furthermore, the refusal to learn from experience often manifests in stubbornness. The stupid cling to their opinions as if they were laws of nature, refusing correction, advice, or even evidence. They interpret feedback as threat, counsel as challenge, and wisdom as criticism. In their minds, to admit error is weakness, and to adjust is betrayal. This rigidity prevents growth, isolates them from those who might guide them, and cements patterns of foolishness that could have been broken by a single act of humility. Learning is a practice, a daily exercise of observation, reflection, and adjustment. The foolish never undertake it. They live in the shadow of their past failures, doomed to repeat them endlessly. In contrast, the wise examine every misstep, extract its lesson, and integrate it into their future choices. They observe without attachment, act without haste, and judge without prejudice. They recognize the impermanence of success and failure alike, and use experience as a mirror to refine character and sharpen judgment. The foolish see only the immediate, the temporary, the self-serving. The wise see the eternal patterns, the hidden causes, the principles that govern life. When you notice a person who is trapped in repetition, blind to lessons, and indifferent to consequence, you are witnessing the second sign of stupidity in its most persistent and destructive form. The inability to govern the mind and the refusal to learn from experience together create a cycle. Impulsivity leads to error. Error produces consequences, and consequences reinforce emotional reaction rather than reflection. The fool blames others, circumstances, or fate for their plight, never seeing that their own mind is the source of freedom or folly. Stoicism teaches that all suffering begins in the mind and can only be mastered there. The failure to recognize this, the surrender to impulse and ignorance, marks the individual as truly unwise. Those who are wise cultivate observation, patience, and the courage to confront themselves. They embrace discomfort as a teacher, reflect upon every action, and adjust accordingly. The foolish, however, see discomfort as an enemy, reflection as unnecessary, and adjustment as weakness. In the end, this refusal to govern the mind and to learn from experience leaves them wandering through life, reacting rather than acting, enslaved rather than free, and constantly at the mercy of what they cannot control. The third sign of a stupid person is the rejection of truth and reason. They are blinded by opinion, bias, and the desire for comfort, often mistaking personal preference for reality. Where a wise person seeks clarity, tests assumptions, and questions their own beliefs, the foolish cling stubbornly to what feels right, what aligns with pride, or what gains social approval. They refuse to consider evidence that challenges their worldview and treat reason itself as optional, elevating emotion and habit above judgment. The world is filled with voices, distractions, and pressures, and the foolish surrender to them, believing consensus or sensation to be the measure of truth. They do not pause to consider whether what they believe is aligned with nature, logic, or enduring principles. The refusal to embrace reason manifests in daily life in countless ways. They argue with certainty over what they do not understand, spread beliefs without investigation, and take pride in holding positions that lack foundation. They mistake repetition for wisdom and volume for insight. Their lives are filled with contradictions, inconsistencies, and the invisible chaos of decisions made without foresight. Where the wise consult evidence, reason, and reflection before acting, the stupid rush forward, guided by impulse, habit, or societal pressure, and wonder why life yields confusion and conflict. In relationships, the rejection of reason fosters conflict. The foolish cannot listen without judgment, cannot discern motive without projection, and cannot consider perspective without distortion. They mistake disagreement for attack, criticism for hostility, and correction for betrayal. This is not mere ignorance, it is a willful blindness, a surrender to the tyranny of ego, convenience, and untested assumptions. Wisdom, on the other hand, thrives in the ability to hear, evaluate, and weigh before reacting. The refusal to do so, to engage rationally with reality, is a mark of persistent stupidity. The fourth sign is the obsession with external approval and the neglect of internal virtue. The foolish person measures themselves by what others think, by reputation, wealth, or recognition, rather than by the integrity of character, the quality of action, or the cultivation of virtue. Stoicism teaches that external things are indifferent. Happiness and strength reside in mastery of the mind and moral conduct, not in applause, status, or material accumulation. Yet the stupid chase validation endlessly, sacrificing reason, judgment, and self-respect for the fleeting warmth of approval. They anchor their sense of worth in the fickle opinions of others, and when those opinions waver, so too does their composure, their confidence, and their sense of identity. This dependence on external validation clouds judgment, distorts priorities, and erodes character. Decisions are made not according to principle, but according to the anticipated reaction of peers or society. Actions are taken to impress, to manipulate, or to conform, rather than to reflect truth, virtue, and foresight. The foolish are trapped in a cycle of comparison, envy, and insecurity, never attaining peace or stability because their measure is constantly shifting. Where the wise cultivate independence from opinion and focus on inner virtue, the foolish remain slaves to admiration, fear, and social judgment. Furthermore, this preoccupation with appearance over substance leads to poor choices. They invest time, energy, and resources into things that bring recognition rather than growth, comfort rather than challenge, and image rather than reality. Their lives become performances, carefully constructed facades, hollow victories, and shallow interactions. Stoic wisdom reminds us that the external world cannot govern the internal state. Those who let it do so fall into folly, sacrificing reason and virtue for the illusion of success. The fourth sign also impacts relationships. The foolish judge themselves and others by superficial markers, failing to see true character, ignoring essential qualities, and elevating trivialities. They are prone to envy, rivalry, and resentment, as their self-worth is tied to relative comparison rather than internal mastery. Wisdom, by contrast, cultivates equanimity, understanding that the only true measure of value lies within, in the cultivation of virtue, reason, and the alignment of action with principle. Those who fall into this trap are often unaware of it. They mistake admiration for achievement, attention for significance, and temporary comfort for fulfillment. They are distracted by external stimuli and shallow rewards, and in doing so, they neglect the cultivation of the mind, the mastery of emotion, and the reflection necessary for growth. Stoic thought teaches that happiness and resilience are rooted in internal discipline, clarity, and virtue. By anchoring themselves to externals, the foolish remain adrift, vulnerable to manipulation, and perpetually dissatisfied. Finally, the combination of rejection of truth and dependence on external validation is dangerous. It leads to poor decisions, shallow understanding, and vulnerability to deception. The foolish build their lives on shifting sands of opinion, pride, and impulse, rather than on enduring principles, reflection, and reason. They become reactive rather than deliberate, controlled by circumstance rather than mastery, and ultimately, unable to navigate the challenges of life with clarity and stability. Where the wise pause, reflect, and seek truth, the stupid cling to appearances, beliefs, and impulses without examination. Where the wise measure their lives by virtue and reason, the foolish are imprisoned by the judgment and approval of others. Where the wise pursue understanding, the foolish pursue distraction. Recognizing this is the first step toward discernment, mastery, and growth, for knowledge alone is insufficient without the application of reason and the cultivation of internal virtue. The fifth sign of a stupid person is the failure to control words and actions. They speak before thinking, act without deliberation, and rarely consider the consequences of their behavior. Stoicism teaches that every word and action carries weight, influencing not only oneself, but also the world around them. The foolish ignore this, letting impulse, pride, or fleeting emotion dictate their conduct. They gossip, quarrel, and make promises they cannot keep, leaving a trail of misunderstanding, hurt, and unnecessary conflict. Each rash word or reckless act is evidence of a mind untrained in discipline, a spirit enslaved by reaction rather than guided by reason. The foolish fail to measure their speech, confusing volume with truth, intensity with insight, and self-expression with wisdom. They reveal their ignorance through careless statements, half-understood ideas, and hasty judgments, while the wise pause, reflect, and speak only when aligned with reason and virtue. The stupid speak as if the world owes them understanding, authority, or attention. Their words often contradict their intentions, inflame situations, and betray character. Stoic thought emphasizes that mastery of speech is a reflection of mastery of self, and those who fail here demonstrate a fundamental lack of discipline and awareness. Actions, too, betray the foolish. They rush into endeavors without planning, yield to impulses, and prioritize immediate gratification over thoughtful outcomes. They ignore lessons from experience, repeat mistakes, and fail to anticipate the consequences of their behavior. In relationships, this recklessness manifests as betrayal, inconsistency, and disappointment. In professional or personal pursuits, it leads to frustration, lost opportunities, and perpetual instability. The foolish live as though life were a series of random events, believing that action alone, regardless of consideration, will produce results. A person lacking control over words and deeds is also vulnerable to manipulation and deception. Because they do not reflect, they are easily persuaded by appearances, promises, or social pressure. They act on the surface of events rather than the principles underlying them. The wise, in contrast, weigh every decision, consider outcomes, and act from a foundation of understanding and virtue. The foolish act blindly, often harming themselves and others, and failing to recognize that every choice, no matter how small, contributes to the pattern of their life. This lack of control is compounded by emotional volatility. Anger, envy, and fear dictate decisions, causing outbursts, rash judgments, and conflict. A moment of unrestrained emotion can undo years of effort and reveal the hollowness of external achievements or knowledge. Stoicism teaches that mastery over emotion is essential for a flourishing life. The foolish, however, surrender to feeling, letting it overrule reason, and in doing so repeat patterns of destruction. Rash action and uncontrolled speech also prevent learning. The foolish speak and act without pause, missing the reflection necessary to understand consequences and extract wisdom. Each impulsive reaction reinforces ignorance as experience passes without being digested or applied. The wise, in contrast, integrate reflection into every action, using it to refine behavior, guide decisions, and cultivate virtue. Lack of control is not simply a moral failing, it is a cognitive and practical one, demonstrating a fundamental weakness in the capacity to live intentionally. Ultimately, the failure to govern words and deeds intersects with all other signs of foolishness. An unmastered mind, a refusal to learn, rejection of truth, and obsession with external approval all manifest in uncontrolled action and speech. The foolish live in a cycle of impulse, consequence, and regret, unaware that the remedy is simple yet demanding: pause, reflect, and act with intention. Self-discipline is the bridge from folly to wisdom, and mastery of action and speech is the final test of whether a person has learned to live according to reason and virtue. The Stoics teach that every individual can cultivate control, reflection, and wisdom, to observe oneself, to restrain words, and to deliberate before acting transforms life from chaos into order, from reaction into purpose. Those who fail here remain prisoners of circumstance, while those who master themselves become architects of their destiny, able to navigate adversity, influence others constructively, and leave a legacy of reason, clarity, and virtue. Recognizing this fifth sign is essential. If you notice rash speech, unconsidered action, and emotional volatility in yourself or others, understand it as a signal mastery is required, reflection is necessary, and intentional living is possible. The cultivation of control over words and actions is not merely etiquette or social prudence. It is the foundation of a life of wisdom, stability, and meaningful impact. Recognizing these 5 signs, the unmastered mind, the refusal to learn, the rejection of truth, dependence on external approval, and failure to control words and actions, is not intended to condemn but to awaken awareness. The path from foolishness to wisdom is open to all who choose reflection, self-discipline, and rational action. Stoic wisdom reminds us that every human possesses the capacity to govern their mind, learn from experience, embrace truth, detach from fleeting approval, and act deliberately. Transformation begins with honest observation of oneself. Are your words measured? Are your actions intentional? Do you pause to reflect and learn? Do you value truth over comfort, reason over impulse, and virtue over applause? These questions are not rhetorical. They are the starting point of growth. Foolishness is not fixed. It is a pattern that can be altered through consistent practice of reason, reflection, and self-control. Each moment offers a choice to act reactively or deliberately, to speak impulsively or wisely, to chase approval or cultivate inner virtue. The wise understand that true intelligence is demonstrated in daily life, in small decisions, in restraint, and in the measured application of thought and action. You are invited to examine your life in light of these signs. Where have you surrendered to impulse, pride, or external influence? Where have you neglected reflection, dismissed truth, or failed to master your own behavior? The recognition of these patterns is the first step toward freedom, clarity, and wisdom. By embracing self-mastery, learning from experience, valuing reason and truth, detaching from external approval, and controlling words and deeds, you move from foolishness into a life of purpose, virtue, and peace. A life of wisdom is not complicated. It is deliberate. It requires patience, observation, courage, and consistent effort. It demands that you pause before reacting, reflect before speaking, and consider the consequences of every choice. It asks that you value inner integrity above transient reward, understanding that the mind and character are the true measures of success. In the end, foolishness is not merely ignorance. It is the surrender of reason, discipline, and reflection. The signs we have explored are warnings and guides, illuminating the path to wisdom. By observing them in yourself and others, and choosing daily to cultivate self-mastery, you align your life with reason, virtue, and clarity. The journey is ongoing, but every step taken with intention strengthens the mind, purifies judgment, and prepares you to live a life of calm strength and meaningful influence. The choice is yours to remain swept along by impulse, habit, and external pressures, or to step deliberately into the practice of wisdom. Stoic thought reminds us that mastery over the self is the only true power, the only unshakable freedom. Begin today, reflect daily, act deliberately, and let the life you build be guided by reason, virtue, and the quiet strength of self-control.